Hello and welcome. I am Forlorn Knight, and today I will be doing a review of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. It's a review I've been trying to finish for like the last 2 weeks. I've been slowly allowing the game to steep and set, and so I could really truly understand the meat and potatoes of the game itself without having to be influenced by the fact that it's new specifically or that it's just out of the box. It's quite controversial right now in the Souls community, on Reddit, online, all over the place because of the lack of online community play and stuff like that. But to be honest with you, I'm going to go ahead and give you my opinion of the game, and I'm going to go ahead and start. And like the first thing I'm going to say to you guys, the first thing I'm going to say that makes it the most controversial part of this game is that it is not a Dark Souls game. You need to remember, number one, it isn't a Dark Souls game. And I'm going to reiterate this several times throughout the review, and this is for a reason. Because people had these hopes and these elements that they believed in that From Software would produce another Souls game like right away. Which, if you want to know what my opinion of producing a Souls game at all after Dark Souls 3, then just watch my other video, which there will be a link in the description for that. But, like I said, without further ado, here is my review of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. So the first thing we're going to touch on is something that I find probably one of the better elements of the game that seemed like it took a while to develop. From Software has never done before, is their combat system is fairly different in this game, and this combat system is amazing. I am absolutely in love with it. I like how elegant it is, and I love everything about the timing and precision and the rhythm of it. So we're going to go over the combat system a bit here. And the expectations of those who thought it was a Souls game were probably supremely challenged in this version of the From Software atmosphere. And as you can see here, the maneuverability of the buttons being pressed in a certain rhythmic pattern is quite quick, actually, and it's very responsive and very, very functional. Far more functional than in the rest of Dark Souls games. It's extremely quick, and you have to utilize your abilities very, very quickly and think on your feet. I mean, like, we're going to go to an example here of Bloodborne, which is not a bad game. It's actually quite fast compared to other games, but it's a bit sluggish in comparison. In this game, you basically you can just move out of the way and attack, move out of the way and attack, and stuff like that. And there's really not much more than that to the gameplay itself. Well, granted, you can parry and whatnot, but in this game, like, you just saw that flip. Watch this flip right here. See how he moves out of the way, and this is all in real time, by the way, when this is usually happening, but it's slowed down here. You can jump on the opponent's head and things of that nature. You can utilize the enemy's body against them if you think on your feet, based on this combat system as opposed to the original combat systems that From Software developed. So we're going to look at the speed here, and it's not just the speed, which is amped up all the way, it's also the rhythm. With the parrying and whatnot. And every enemy has their own rhythm, and following the timing properly is what makes it extremely difficult compared to the other Souls games. So granted, this isn't a Souls game, so the iframes are extremely small. If you've seen that window just now that I showed you, there's very, very little windows for change and whatnot. And of course, you've got the elegance of the ending of the battle itself, which is lended to the death blow, the ninja death blow, which is a nice feeling. It feels like a great accomplishment, honestly. So basically, you get little windows, tiny, tiny windows. You can't do what you did before, and it makes it extremely difficult. But when you do beat a boss, it feels so rewarding. You just get this feeling of massive reward when it happens, in my opinion. So the next thing I'm going to go over is the gameplay itself, which is very different than anything From Software's ever put out before. And what I want to touch on specifically is the way you navigate the enemies and the map itself, which lends itself to an older type of playstyle, but at the same time very fast and fluid, and it favors the concept of strategy as opposed to bravery itself, knowing when to run, knowing what enemies to take on, and basically using different skill sets than most people use in Dark Souls games, which is interesting because it's very different. It's It's very different than anything From Software's put out in a long time, which is comparable in my mind to something like Tenchu Z or like Wrath of God Tenchu, which in my mind is basically the spiritual father or mother of Sekiro itself, with its verticality, with its movement system, with the use of stealth and death blows and whatnot, which is actually one of my favorite games of all time. The Tenchu series in my mind is probably one of the best game series that's ever been made. Even though Miyazaki himself says that it's not, a sequel, it's still basically like the spiritual father of it. Which is vastly different than the Dark Souls we know and love today. That doesn't mean that Dark Souls is bad in any sense of the word, but basically that Dark Souls itself is very different. And I'm going to keep reiterating that Sekiro itself is not a Souls game. The way that they approach the game is very, very different than you would approach a Dark Souls game, which most Dark Souls veterans know how to run through most maps and how to avoid enemies and whatnot without taking too much damage and whatnot. But with Sekiro, the verticality, the speed of the game, the way that you traverse the map is very, very different. The enemies themselves are very different. They're a little more aggressive in Sekiro. They're a little more bright, because in Dark Souls it's mostly like ads and zombies and stuff like that. And most of these enemies in Sekiro can basically two-shot you, and they're always defending themselves. They're super alert. They have a lot of mini-bosses in the game. And for what I understand, there's about 50 bosses total, including the mini-bosses, which is a lot of stuff to deal with. And how you approach these mini-bosses, it tends to be part of the strategy. You have to take out these ads before you even go and approach and attempt, fighting these mini-bosses in the first place, which are no joke and can be harder than the actual bosses themselves, depending on the boss you're fighting. But the feel of the game itself really lends to a very different feeling from anything I've ever played before. You feel very immersed in the game itself, to the point where you don't even realize what's going on around you. So yeah, approaching these mini-bosses is kind of ridiculous. You can usually find a strategy to better fight them and whatnot, and you're given like tools and whatnot. You get ninja prosthetics, which are like firecrackers and stuff like that, which will change the dynamic of the game greatly, in my opinion. Which a lot of people were angry with when they first saw the footage about Sekiro, that it was only like one moveset, one specific weapon and whatnot. But I think that replayability will kind of be on the hinges of DLC, specifically utilizing the ninja tools that you're given in the game, possibly trying different type of playthroughs, different types of challenges, that kind of stuff, skill trees, that kind of stuff. So I don't know, I think they compensated that way, and I don't think they had it in their mind that they wanted to make it Souls-like in any appearance, that they wanted to create the feel and the atmosphere of Sekiro being completely on its own and independent from the Soul series. So I think when people got angry about that, they didn't realize that the game isn't meant to be Souls. It's basically meant to be its own universe and its own environment. So I really respect that about the game, and I really think they did a great job making this game. So that's my opinion about it so far. So the next part I'm going to touch on is the difficulty, which is something that's a little touchy in the Dark Souls community, especially on Reddit and Facebook and all these different groups and stuff, because it's hard for them to understand in groups like that how they fall into difficulty based on previous games as opposed to this one. And I'm going to reiterate this yet again. Sekiro is not a Dark Souls game. You can't compare them in the same valley at all. They're not even closely related to the point where they could be considered a Souls. It can be considered a Soulsborne game. There are similarities between the style of gameplay, but they're definitely not the same type of game. Originally in Dark Souls, for people that soloed through the game, it was totally possible to level up and then return to bonfires, and then continue to do so to gain experience points over a period of time, increasing damage, increasing your health, increasing casting ability, stuff like that. And Sekiro it's completely absent of that, which adds to the element of difficulty for people that are used to going that route and farming out things and stuff like that. In Sekiro, it's nothing like that. The reasoning is that in Sekiro, you legitimately have to kill a boss just to do more damage. You have to kill a boss just to get more health, just to get more posture, and the ability to heal. So that's one of the added elements of difficulty in Sekiro as opposed to a Souls game. The other one, of course, is no summoning. There is no online play at all. So, gone are the days where you could summon like 5 or 6 phantoms to help you fight a boss. which in my opinion isn't very satisfying, but you know, I am also a challenge runner. And some people aren't as skilled, and maybe they just like playing with their friends, which I have nothing against, but honestly, it's kind of broken when you can summon like 5 phantoms to fight a single boss, and in Sekiro that's totally not possible. Which, in my mind, kind of creates a more pure PvE experience, which I really enjoy because I love the PvE experience in From Software games. As for difficulty in itself, with its inability to farm levels, with its really tiny iframes, the enemies that do a ton of damage, who are always on the defense, ready to fight you, as well as the inability to summon people to help you through a boss fight, I suggest that this is probably the most difficult From Software game I've ever played in my life. But then again, you know, difficulty varies upon person. And if you really want to know my in-depth detail of what I consider difficult, you could always watch my YouTube video, which I'll leave a link in the description for that. But basically, there are 3 types of difficulty, in my opinion, when it comes to From Software games. And that has to do with experience, of course, which is a big one. And then, of course, it has to do with roll timing, and then, of course, strategy. And I feel that Sekiro itself is definitely the most balanced version of a From Software game that I've ever played, which I really enjoyed this game. I think this is probably my new favorite From Software game. Alright, so the last thing I'm really going to touch on is the storyline, which I actually really enjoy. And From Software has a way of keeping things esoteric and interesting, but there's always this cycle in their games. And like the first time you meet Owl here as Wolf, you meet him on this battlefield, and it's, you know, wrecked and destroyed and stuff like that. And it's just strange how things unfold in the game in a cycle. And it happens in Dark Souls games as well. But this field itself, you end up fighting a boss they call Horse Boy, or the Demon, or whatever you want to call it right here. You end up going onto this battlefield and fighting for yourself another character and stuff. And I really like how encapsulating the story is in this game, and how everything kind of comes in a full circle at the very end. And even some of the endings end that way, where things just end up in a circle, in a cycle in a way. And I think Miyazaki himself has a good way of kind of perpetuating a constant storyline. And Wolf is now probably one of my favorite characters of all time, along with Ishin here, who you see at the beginning of the game, who's having like the fight of his life essentially against a extremely brute, terrible general opponent. And he's just, you know, this all-out bloody combat with this guy, you know, and it's a bloody era and everything's just really dark and stuff like that. And then, of course, you end up fighting him on the same battlefield that he originally won on against the general in the first place. Of course, he's transformed into the Sword Saint, which is a ridiculous boss fight, by the way, guys. It's amazing, but you end up ending his life on the same battlefield that he gained honor on. And I think, in my mind, that is basically what Sekiro represents in my mind. I really did enjoy this game, and I think it's absolutely brilliant and definitely a masterpiece. If it doesn't win Game of the Year either way, I'll probably be angry. But I can honestly say this is my new favorite From Software game. The final part of this is that I just want to say that there are some great things about the game. There's only like 2 main things that I necessarily could see being a problem. One being that the camera it can be pretty terrible at times, especially for a brand new game in this generation. It still acts kind of like a Dark Souls camera, where it gets stuck and glitched out against the wall when you're fighting a boss or an enemy or something like that. And it tends to be a pain in the butt. Aside from that, some people would say that specifically it's the online play that might be a problem for replayability and whatnot, but a lot of those people are specifically oriented towards the online element of the game itself. And people like me that strictly do PvE, we really don't have much of a problem with the concept that it's a PvE based game, and it's a pure PvE based environment. From Software had said that they might actually end up doing a PvP based battle royale type game, so that might be something to look forward to. But like I said, this is not a Dark Souls game. It was never meant to be a Dark Souls game. Time is not transient in the world of Sekiro, and like I said, it is an amazingly well-developed, beautiful masterpiece, and I hope that it wins Game of the Year this year. And if it doesn't, I will riot. Honestly, it's a great game, and I definitely suggest it to anybody who is a fan of difficult video games, who's a fan of the Souls series, who's a fan of Tenshu, who's a fan of Ninja Gaiden, things like that. So like I said, I really do enjoy it, and I really do suggest it. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. I will see you guys later.